Things certainly got crazy very quickly this week in MMA, and as usual, we're here to break it all down for you. So let's get straight into it. The biggest news of all comes in first, as the legendary former light heavyweight champion Jon Jones finally confirms his return to action with a UFC 285 headlining showdown against Ciryl Gane. This fight, which will stand as Jones' first octagon appearance in over 3 years, will also be his first dip into the heavyweight division. In recent times, Jon has been packing on the pounds, getting used to his heavyweight frame after leaving 205 pounds behind him for good back in 2020. And as you all likely knew, his final matchup in the division he ruled for years certainly left a lot of fans unconvinced. That narrow victory over Dominic Reyes came in a very close fight. It wasn't quite a robbery, but it was close enough that most people scored it against Jones. Now, after all this time away, Jon will finally have the opportunity to answer his critics. In recent times, it has been very easy to focus on the scandals that have engulfed Jones' career, rather than the success that made him the legend that he is. But with all of the marbles on the table and the risk levels at an all-time high, it's pretty fair to say that one of the true greats of our sport is gearing up for the biggest fight of his career so far. All the way through his time at 205, questions about how the youngest champion in the UFC history would fare at heavyweight were always prominent. Jon teased a move up several times, fights with Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez, and more that never materialized. But now it appears as though the door has been forever shut on a move back down to the division he ruled for the best part of a decade. The news about Jones' return broke in the strangest possible way, when residents of Las Vegas, Nevada noticed that the T-Mobile Arena's digital billboard was displaying an advertisement for Jones vs. Gane before anyone knew it was even in the works. Once this began to circulate, the UFC were forced to act, making the story public knowledge shortly after. The UFC announced that Jones will take on the former interim heavyweight champion Ciryl Gane in the UFC 285 main event in the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada on March 4th. The card will also feature the return of the former bantamweight champion Cody Garbrandt, who takes on Julio Arce, the eagerly anticipated debut of Bo Nickel, who takes on Jamie Pickett, and a pivotal middleweight showdown between Derek Brunson and Dricus du Plessis. If that wasn't crazy enough, the headlining bout between Jones and Gane will officially be a 5-round fight for the undisputed heavyweight title, meaning that the reigning champion, Francis Ngannou, has officially been stripped of his belt. But that's far from the only interesting bit. According to the UFC, Ngannou has officially been released from his contract, and the promotion will be giving up the right to match the best offer he receives in free agency. This means that Dana White and his team basically called Francis on his bluff, or more likely, decided to act on his unwillingness to play ball with them. Ngannou has received a lot of praise in recent times for his outspoken attitude towards the UFC and their treatment of fighters, and for him as the heavyweight champion of the world to be ousted from the company for whatever the reason could well have a huge impact on the fighter pay discussion. Dana himself spoke in the wake of the most recent UFC event and tried to paint a picture of what had happened for the fans. In his own words, the UFC president said the following about Ngannou's promotional exit. "We're going to release Francis Ngannou from his contract. We're giving up the right to match. He can go wherever he wants and do whatever he wants. We offered Ngannou a deal that would make him the highest paid heavyweight of all time. He turned it down." Most people know to take everything Dana says with a rather large pinch of salt, but as things stand, there has been no word from Francis Ngannou or his team. This shocking revelation would make Ngannou one of only a very small number of champions to leave the UFC without losing their belt. Dana, during his press conference, seemed to be set pushing the narrative that Ngannou simply didn't want to compete against riskier, high-level opponents, but everything from Francis we have heard in recent months would suggest that their issues run far deeper. But for now, all we can say for sure is that the heavyweight title will be up for grabs on match 4, and Jon Jones and Ciryl Gane will have the opportunity to take home the mantle of the baddest man of the planet. Gane himself posted a very short message of confirmation to his Instagram followers with the caption, "Dream big." At first, it did seem as though Francis Ngannou was going to be the next one to welcome Jones to the octagon, and let's not forget that Stipe Miocic was also in that mix for a while. A man who knows more than most about both Miocic and Jones chimed in with his opinion recently. Jon's old rival, Daniel Cormier, had a pretty unique take on the Ngannou and the Gane switch-up, and how avoiding the power that Francis brings might not be as beneficial as you might expect. In his eyes, though Ngannou obviously possesses the more prominent danger levels, he actually believes that Ciryl Gane's masterful movement and striking background makes him a more difficult matchup for Jones. Ciryl Gane's movement and the way that he attacks is going to make him very difficult for Jones, because as good as Jones isn't the guy that moves very much. He's very stationary and going forward. The issue is with Ciryl Gane, you're going to have a big guy who possesses a lot of those same qualities with the ability to move. Go back and watch Jones, he's pretty flat-footed, Gane isn't. No matter what happens, the news that Jon Jones is officially coming back is pretty huge. And in a year that is already bringing us the battle for pound number 1 status in Makhachev vs Volkanovski, this fight between the heavyweights might be even more exciting to the fans. Funnily enough, when it comes to Makhachev vs Volkanovski, the winner of that fight might only be able to enjoy their newfound spot as pound-for-pound king for 3 weeks before it's stolen away by the returning Jones if he can find the win. But Ciryl Gane is just about as tough a test as can be. And even if Jon Jones hasn't lost a step in the 3 years he has spent on the sidelines, it still might not be enough to find the win against a guy like Ciryl Gane. While we're on the subject of losing a step, a major test in the career and overall legacy of Kamaru Usman has now been set in stone for the UFC 286, in the form of his long-awaited trilogy fight with the newly crowned champion of the welterweight division, Leon Edwards. When these two guys first met, they were a pair of rising 170-pound prospects, and their 3-round bout, which Usman comfortably won, did little to foreshadow just how far these guys would eventually go. Their most recent fight, however, well, that was a bout that contained a knockout for the ages. The former pound-for-pound king, Kamaru Usman, lost his belt to the most shocking fashion possible, as Edwards scored a comeback victory against all odds, nailing the champ with a picture-perfect head kick with just a minute on the clock. A new champion was crowned in that moment, but the nature of the finish doesn't tell the full story of the fight. Usman was once again pretty comfortable in his dominance, working through a tough first round to win the next 3 decisively. Now when Edwards struck, he struck gold. The question now is just how Kamaru's confidence will be, having sustained such a massive defeat on the big stage. The UFC have gone all out with their next appearance in England, following up 2 hugely successful shows in 2022, with their first pay-per-view in the UK since UFC 204's clash between the middleweight champion Michael Bisping and his great rival Dan Henderson. This time, UFC 286 will be the event, and already it's been pointed to as one of the biggest and best European fight cards in years. In the main event, Leon Edwards will attempt to do the double on his rival, the former champ Kamaru Usman. Just below that on the billing, 2 of the most exciting lightweights on the roster right now will throw down, as Justin Gaethje takes on the rising phenom that is Rafael Fiziev, in a bout that is almost certain to come away with the fight of the night honors at the very least. And in the featured bout just below the co-main, a middleweight showdown between the former title challenger Marvin Vettori and the in-form Roman Dolidze, a guy who just finished Jack Hermansson using some of the most uniquely slick Brazilian jiu-jitsu you will ever see. Sure, a lot of the focus will be on the main event, but UFC 286 looks set to be filled to the brim with unmissable showdowns. Whether we see Paddy Pimblett, Molly McCann, or even someone like Darren Till on there remains to be seen, but early signs are certainly positive. For Edwards, who remains an unlikely champion all things considered, this opportunity represents a major step in the right direction as far as building his brand and legacy is concerned. Usman isn't getting any younger, and that was just about as brutal a knockout loss as any man has sustained in the UFC up to this point. If Leon can close out the trilogy with a win in front of a crowd of his supporters, that could well open the door to a truly massive Khamzat Chimaev fight that would easily be one of the year's biggest pay-per-view attractions. Only time will tell, I guess. But which fight in 2023 are you most excited by? And when it comes to Jones vs Gane and Edwards vs Usman, what are your predictions? Let us know in the comment section below before liking the video and subscribing to the channel, so you can stay up to date with all of our weekly uploads. Thanks for tuning in.